request all speakers to be concise, when they answer, because that way we will be able to allocate, 7 to 8 minutes per speaker. So let us start in the same order. So first question I will ask to Krishna. The question is from Manas. Krishna, can you hear me?
Yeah, hi.
Okay. So the question is, what is the insight behind the order of introducing statements for computing MHP information? Basically, can we generalize the order for languages with a large number or kinds of concurrency primitives?
Yeah, good question. If you look at so the question is regarding the IMHP analysis, where we were inserting the statements in a certain order. And the reason why it was inserted there was that if you just add finishes, right? I added finishes, but I have not increased the complexity. I have not added incurred any cost to compute the MHP analysis, right? Because the finishes are join statements. So if you have no task creation, but only join, then I'm getting MHP information for free. So they are inserted in a certain order so that the MHP information can be computed fast. And on-the-fly MHP analysis, the PPOP20 paper generalizes this for at least extent, wherein you can insert these in any order, but we will still be able to get fast MHP analysis. Extending it to other languages is still, like Java, is still a challenge.
All right, so let us move on to the next question, which is from Raghavan. The question is, all languages do not have async finish constructs. The parallelism constructs in which widely used languages are mappable to async finish constructs.
Yeah, so what is this async finish construct is basically a mechanism to provide a tree type of fork join parallelism, wherein you fork a few tasks and you wait for them and so on, where you can reason about the parent and the child very clearly. While this is common in languages like Extend, Edge, Chapel, even Silk, this is not the case in languages like Java, right? Where Java, you create a thread in one place and join somewhere else. That's why I said extending these ideas to Java would be a challenge. OpenMP we can still do, because OpenMP, for most part, the task creation is very clear on where is the creator, where you are joining them, and so on.
All right. Okay. And if you get some more time, there can be a direct interaction also. But let me first try to finish with the questions. Next question is from Priyanka to Krishna. The question is, for experimental evaluation, you mentioned that you removed 20% of the nodes. Did you use any particular heuristic to select the nodes?
Not quite. We just we randomly removed 20% of the node because we didn't find any particular reason why this should be removed this way, right?
I see. Okay. Next question is from Deepak D'Souza. The question is there a precise definition of MHP S1, S2?
Okay, I wonder what you mean by precise. So MHP S1, S2, say the answer can be yes or no, or typically you can also go for three value logic, yes, no, maybe. Along with it, there is also a condition. The condition, I guess, is the one you are asking about. The condition you will see in the paper is about the typical loop dependencies. If two statements are in two different loops, they may run in parallel if their first loop iteration matches, second loop doesn't, second loop index is not the same, and so on. So the condition, I guess, is what you're asking about, is in terms of the loop dependencies, in terms of the execution instance of the.
He's only asking for a precise definition.
Yeah, precise definition is whether they may run in parallel, yes or no, and under what condition. The condition is stated in terms of loop dependencies.
All right. Okay. Next question is from Sridhar. The question is, what is the effect of style of programming language for MHP analysis? So I guess it's the programming paradigm that he is wondering about. Say MHP in functional versus object oriented. So how will that differ?
Excellent question. As we were discussing earlier also, the MHP analysis that we are doing is depending a lot on the structure of the program that's allowed to be written in these languages. If the language allows us to write arbitrary code, first of all, MHP analysis, getting precise MHP analysis itself, theoretical study way back in 1983 was shown that it is undecidable. Even under some constraints, this is NP complete, where you assume that all paths can be taken. And what we are proposing are just heuristics. And if we, excuse me, yeah, and the crow seems to agree with me. If we change the language where you can create a task somewhere and you can join somewhere arbitrarily in a different place, then we have to come up with a different scheme. The current scheme depends a lot on the structure.
All right. So I think I will now ask the next question to Meenakshi. Meenakshi, are you there?
Yeah.
Okay. So Meenakshi, the first question to you is from Raghavan, who asks, you gave patterns to detect disjoint blocks. Are these patterns exhaustive, or they find a subset of pairs of disjoint blocks?
No, the patterns for disjoint blocks are exhaustive, manually done per RTOS.
I see. He has another question for you. Who classified the true positives into benign and harmful, and on what basis?
So that Abhishek did, because he knows the RTOS and he knows which is a benign race and which is an actual harmful race. So it was done manually by Abhishek.
I see. Okay. The next question is from Subodh, who actually had asked 2 questions, but then he withdrew 1 question. So I will ask the second question.
Yeah.
Subodh says, I'm curious to understand the reasons beyond block dependencies that were causing false positives in your analysis.
Okay, so for HAL RTOS, we did have a good number of false positives. The biggest reason we observed was many of the false positives were observed when the initial sort of boot operations were happening, like between a process create thread and callback. And our disjoint blocks would mark them, but it will so happen that a process create thread can only be created by let's say a main API and stuff like that, and we would mark them as disjoint blocks. Callbacks cannot be called at that time when process creation happens, and a good number of false positives came around this time.
All right. There is another extension to his question, I guess, from Raghavan. He asked, can you discuss more what is considered a benign race and what is harmful race? Is there a formal definition of this, at least for the OS you considered?
Yes. So harmful race is a race that causes issues in the sense that it causes errors. Benign race is a race that is known to the developer, or it was not known to the developer. It got known because of our analysis and doesn't cause any errors as far as the use of operating system is concerned. That's the definition.
All right. I think we are done with all of these questions that were asked in the chat window, but we have enough time. So I will request audience to raise their hand in this, if you see the hand feature, raise your hand feature, and then ask your question directly by first introducing yourself and then also kind of addressing the speaker that you want to ask your question to. So are there any more?
Deepak here. Sorry if I didn't find a way of raising my hand.
Yeah, no, I couldn't, yes. But please go ahead, Deepak.
Yeah, so I had sent a question for Krishna. Sorry, I couldn't join because we're having our interviews also going on parallelly.
So if the one question about your precise definition of MHP S1, S2, I had asked him. But if you want, yeah. So
okay, sorry, maybe I can take it offline.
You can take it offline. Yeah. Fine, yeah. Are there any other questions to any other speakers? Hello. Hello, can you hear? Yeah. Hello, can you hear me?
Krishna, we can't hear you, but we can see you talking.
Yeah, can I ask, because I'm not able to raise my hand?
Okay. Yeah, I couldn't see it, so I do not know how to detect that, because right now I couldn't see. But please go ahead with your question. Yeah.
Okay. So Meenakshi, in your evaluation, I was curious if you could compare it with any other prior existing works. Because you showed
data races have been existing forever in some sense, race conditions and data races. But the only main crucial difference here is that we would want to analyze data races in kernel APIs, where the kernel APIs belong to an RTOS. So this becomes a little challenging because they use several low-level synchronization mechanisms, as I told you. And we really cannot understand what happens. So to the extent that we know, Deepak's work on FreeRTOS is one big volume of work on analyzing kernel APIs. But program analysis based features for kernel APIs data races I have not seen before. So we just built upon Nikita and Deepak's work and used it for other RTOSs. In Abhishek's case, this HAL RTOS, it was challenging because it was a giant RTOS with multiple partitions and all that stuff.
I was curious if any of the existing software, I mean, if you run the existing tools, did you get any more number of false positives or was it too slow?
No, actually, we tried to run tools like Clockworks and all that stuff, and they weren't going anywhere. I mean, they were reporting all kinds of.
Okay.
All right. Hello, am I audible? Yeah, okay. So let me ask one question to Priyanka. Priyanka, are you there?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. So Priyanka, my question is more general, more open. Can you motivate us? Can you motivate software engineering researchers about your work in the sense that can you explain what applications do you see of your work, and how will you change that state of the art? How is it relevant to software engineering? I'm sure it is, but I'm just trying to understand that so that it will help all of us.
So unfortunately, some of my slides were skipped. In that slides, I was discussing about the program synthesis application for this Boolean function synthesis. So currently, we are also looking at the direct application of Manthan over program synthesis. So basically, the technique it is using is it generates the candidates using the machine learning way. But it differs from the classical CIGAR approaches because we are not learning the abstraction of the functions, we are learning the approximate version of the candidates. So it can have the double-sided errors. So, and I think that can be used in the program synthesis also.
Sorry, Priyanka, I missed your last slide. Can you repeat it? There was a kind of a gap between your, the video got, frozen, for a couple of seconds. Can you please repeat last couple of lines?
So I was telling that the approach Manthan is using is different from the classical CIGAR-based approaches where we learn the functions using the abstractions, right? So the CIGAR-based approaches uses the abstraction-based candidates, but the Manthan uses machine learning to come up with candidates. So it's like the approximation of the candidates. So it can have the double-sided errors. And that is something I think the program synthesis community can explore in their work also. So these kind of techniques which Manthan is, so it's like a hybrid of all these, the constraint sampling, machine learning, and the automated reasoning. So these hybrid mixture can be used for the program synthesis community also. And the way it is refining, it is using this proof-based analysis also. So that can be also useful for the program synthesis community.
All right. All right. Thanks.
I have a question for Priyanka. Can I ask?
Yeah, yes, please go ahead.
Priyanka, again, maybe it's lost out because of the condensed presentation. I'm curious to know the applications where you have applied. How big are those applications? Can you give an idea about, the size of the applications you could use it on, and how much time it takes and all that?
The size of the application, I didn't get your question in terms of size of the application, but the timeout we used for our benchmark evaluation was the 7200 seconds, that is 2 hours. And if you
how big are these benchmarks you're talking about?
So in terms of input and output variables, it's like 10,000 to 50,000 variables.
But what are these applications? I mean, what are the type of these benchmarks you're looking at?
So this is basically the factorization problem benchmarks. And so there is this QBF eval competition. So we use the benchmarks from that competition. So it includes all kind of query. The statement coverage benchmarks were also part of the factorization. So it's like the whole mixture of the hybrid categories.
Okay. I mean, just now an open-ended question. When do you see? You feel free to punt it if you want. How do you see these techniques being extended to real-world, large-size programs?
So the real-world large size, here in NUS, the government is using Manthan, or is trying to use the Manthan, kind of Manthan-based strategy for the cryptographic-based evaluation. So I think the real-world strategy it can be used.
No, large size. No. See, cryptographic applications typically are small. I mean, let's say I want to apply it, say, for some large few millions of lines of code, or even few tens of thousands of lines of code.
So right now it is able to handle up to 50,000 variables, but I believe that. But I believe that we will be able to do much better. So it's like a name enumeration of. So I implemented the Manthan, so I'm pretty sure that I'm not a good programmer. So if someone from the industry or like someone like the professional implements it, then it can be like it will be able to handle much better.
Very good.
So can you tell us like a couple of current and future applications about like Manthan? What future do you see for Manthan?
So for Manthan, there are plenty of projects I am currently working on. So the first is, as I have talked about, this program synthesis domain. We want to extend this Manthan-like approach for the program synthesis domain and the first order logic synthesis also. And similarly, there were plenty of open questions I discussed at the end of my presentation, the interesting future work questions. So the way we are generating data. So this is like the data we generate for this relational. So the data is relational data, and we want to learn the function out of it. So that's where it differs from the classical machine learning. So first is data is without the noise. So all are the satisfying assignments of the specification. There is no noise. But and the second is it's a relational data. So for the one input valuation, we can have the multiple output valuation. That's also we differ from the classical machine learning. So we don't know the ideal distribution of the data, like what kind of data we should use. So these are plenty of applications and the future work directions we want to look into. So there are plenty of projects I'm working on. So let's see how it goes.
Okay, sounds very interesting, Priyanka. Good luck to you.
Thank you.
This is Ravindra. I have one question.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Hi, Priyanka. I have one question. I learned only yesterday that there are something called sequential covering algorithms to detect rule sets. I don't know whether this is relevant to that. I just wanted to understand. I was looking at something in the synthesis context to come up with a Boolean function. So how does your approach differs from the sequential covering algorithms proposed in AI? I think this is way long back in the AI available even in mid 80s and 90s.
I'm sorry, but I'm not aware of this sequential covering algorithms.
Sequential covering algorithms, my understanding is it will, given a set of input-output pairs, it can come up with a Boolean rule set that will kind of satisfy that.
So then it will be completely different. I'm just guessing. So because I don't know about this sequential covering algorithm in detail, but the Manthan is a novel approach. So it is the first approach that uses the data generation and this approximate learning of the candidate. So maybe it differs, but I'm not sure because I don't know the background you are talking about, so I'm not able to comment on that.
So, so Raghu, you have raised your hand.
Yeah,
Okay,
I just wanted to pose a general question, nothing specific to a particular speaker, just an extension of what you were already discussing, right? So we're talking about program synthesis and at a low level in terms of pointers that Manas was talking about and parallelism that Krishna was talking about. And then when you start moving into industry, people are always talking about a very high level, in terms of abstractions. They're always talking about applications, right? So there's a wide gap that, somehow is being perceived between academia and then, moving that into industry. So is there some way where we can probably look at, saying specific use cases or applications that people can focus on to bridge this gap? I mean, it may be a perceived gap, but I do believe that such a perceived gap exists.
I can take part of this question, if I may.
Yeah, please, Manas, go ahead.
Yeah, so one way where I have seen some industries interested in is like when we implement these techniques and they scale and they can be integrated into some IDs. So industries have programmers and they really want them to program well. And some of these pointer analysis techniques and things like MHP, which Krishna was talking about, when we integrate them into, I mean, the industry is not excited about the applications, but I have found that they are really interested when these techniques help them program in a better sense. Yeah, but I'll leave the remaining things for other panel members to answer.
Yeah, anyone else like Meenakshi, Krishna, Priyanka, anyone want to comment on that?
See, one thing is that industry is definitely interested. Like my student Abhishek, he's from HAL, Hindustan Aeronautics Limited. It's a PSU, different kind of industry, not IT corporate giants. So they do struggle with a lot of problems and they are interested in any kind of analysis that will help them directly. And they just cannot afford these tools. I mean, he had a bad experience with a tool like Clockworks, which they bought with hefty price and didn't help them. And so they are definitely interested, and I think we should find ways to collaborate.
All right.
I have a slightly different take, where I will kind of group what Raghu mentioned about industry. So now there are different types of industries. There are industries which are looking at they have their own applications. There are industries which are going for systems, like say IBM, Sun, Oracle, and Sun is no more there, right? IBM, Oracle, NVIDIA, and so on, Intel. So if you look at these industries which are going for the systems type of work, what we have seen, I was hoping that Manas will say that, but he didn't, I guess, forgot, that when we had this implementation of point-star analysis in the hotspot JVM, the interest from IBM immediately was very high, and so was with Oracle. Because when we do it in a real-world compiler or a real-world system that they care for, I guess that's what even Meenakshi was saying, if you do it in a real way that people, companies are using, then they will show interest. I think the key many times is implementing in a real-world system is way more difficult for a student. So I think that's a challenge, but I think it also gives the appropriate. I mean, even I think Priyanka will see it soon when people are using her tool, she will get a lot more traction with what she's proposing.
Anything that you want to comment about, Priyanka?
No, I agree with Krishna in that. So yeah.
So I have one question for Manas, which is open-ended, but not as open-ended as Raghu's question, but it is still open-ended. The question is, so what is your advice for programmers and also for compiler writers? I mean, about about pointer analysis. So when should we stop? What is the end to it? So we can come up with better and better techniques, right? And typically they also need more resources, right? I mean, in terms of time and computing resources. So just to give an analogy, maybe it's like testing, right? There is no end to it. I mean, if we have time, we just we just keep on testing it until we run out of our time budget. In a way, I mean, the companies, so they have some budget and they just try to finish their testing within that time budget. So what is your general advice? So how do I know that my pointer analysis is quite good and I'm happy and I'm now going to invest on some other aspects of either development or compiler components?
Yeah,
but not
that's a very good question, in fact. And I think from my experience with pointer analysis, I would say one way would be to look at the application here. So let's say we are working on if we get to work on a compiler directly. Now let's say people work on object sensitivity a lot, right? But then which compiler actually implements object sensitivity? So that's one thing to keep in mind here, and I feel in general. And one point which I just highlighted over during in my slides was that, let's say I myself have worked a lot on context sensitivity, but then once I want to take these techniques to a just-in-time compiler, in a just-in-time compiler, it's still a challenge to analyze methods in different contexts. The infrastructure doesn't exist fully. We are working on it. Some other people are also working on it. But then, yeah, I guess that's one way to look at this, that how much can you apply those techniques in the real world?
Okay, all right. Yeah. So again, coming back to audience, are there any questions for any of the speakers? Please raise your hand, and if you have any question. So if we do not have any questions, then I think we can end our session here. We are pretty close to the end time anyways. Well, there is a question from Lalit. Lalit, please go ahead with the question. Lalit, please, I think you are on mute.
Oops, sorry. So while you were seeking for the last question, I was typing on the chat window. Sorry about that. I mean, there is a lot of implications and usefulness of neural networks across. I'm curious to see what are your observations in terms of its involvement in compilers, program analysis, and synthesis.
Can I take it?
Yep.
Yeah. Hi, Lalit.
I actually want to hear from all of them as well.
Yeah. Sure. So for synthesis, not for the program synthesis, but at least for the Boolean function synthesis, instead of decision tree, we are currently looking at the different machine learning approaches. So that includes SVM neural networks and all. The only issues we are currently seeing is so we want to represent like input variables in terms of output variables to synthesize the function. So this representation is difficult in the neural network. So we get the rules like the decision boundaries and all, but this kind of translation back into the representation of output variables in terms of input variables is the difficult task to do. So I think there are many, with the help of neural networks and all, we will be able to come up with a good strategies, or we'll be able to see the improvement in the number of benchmarks solved. But still there are many kind of different challenges, and hopefully in the future you will see Manthan working with the neural networks also.
Yeah, thanks, Priyanka. Any other speakers want to comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, this looks like all this. I mean, you only, I think Lalit raised this point about neural networks. So everything that I do not understand, everything I do not understand, I club them in under this umbrella of artificial intelligence, machine learning, neural networks, and all these things, deep learning. There was recently some interesting work on trying to generate some of these optimized codes or even optimizations using machine learning. There was a paper a couple of years back on generating peephole optimizers using machine learning, right? So there are some works, but what my observation is, peephole optimization is something that can be learned, unlike and learned from, because it's a standard set of patterns, unlike things like which are let's say points to analysis or say what Meenakshi is doing, which are kind of slightly more involved. So in such cases, identifying these things using machine learning is an interesting challenge. But I guess there are a lot of people who are looking, having interest in this for, I think, from two reasons. One, if you have a project proposal with machine learning in name, you get money. So you definitely want to go in that line.
All right.
And you can't keep their interest.
Meenakshi and Manas, you have any comments on that?
Not
because it's
nothing.
A very broad question. I'm sure that
Yeah.
It's worth discussing, even though we are kind of already reached the end of it, but still we will just have spent a couple of minutes and
No, I still I am still in the league of people who are probably not as aware of these techniques in the compilers community. But specific to what I have been mentioning about context sensitivity, there have been works over the last 3-4 years where people have tried to learn which methods, for example, or what are the patterns under which a particular method should be analyzed in a particular kind of context abstraction, or whether a method can be analyzed context sensitively, or is it okay to analyze it insensitively. So people have tried to read or identify such patterns from corpuses of large programs. And yeah, so there are some interesting things coming up which we can start learning ourselves before applying machine learning into our domain, I think.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm not the most knowledgeable person on Krishna that if you have ML in it, then you'll probably get the funding. So we are trying to formally verify neural networks as applied to autonomous systems. I don't know about synthesis, but the formal methods community is definitely trying to formally verify neural networks, all kinds of neural networks that they can verify. And if you are specifically interested in program synthesis, I would like to point you to a recent course that was offered at IISc. Deepak Chiranjeev and Sriram Rajamani offered a course on program synthesis where they did quite a bit of machine learning aspects for program synthesis. So you could probably look up that course page and or maybe talk to Deepak or Sriram about it, and they will be able to give you additional pointers. I think it was an interesting course that they offered.
Yes, all right.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any more questions, or I think we can close it here. But before we close it, let me thank all the speakers. They did a wonderful job and very exciting talks, very informative. Also to participants, to audience, for joining us today, to organizers of this wonderful meeting for giving their time and their effort, and very, very importantly to our team who is managing this online kind of wonderful meeting, and their job is not easy at all. We had some hiccups in between, but I totally understand the kind of work they're doing and the challenge they are dealing with. So so kind of a round of applause for them also, and great job, keep doing it. And we still have 3 more sessions to go. The next session will start in 5 minutes, Raghu, 5-6 minutes.
Yeah, I mean
11:40, right? Yeah. So we will end over here, and let us join at 11:40.
Is Raghavan still there? He will probably chair if he's still available. So. Let me take control.
Okay.